abortion. I, as a public employee, my insurance policy does not cover abortion unless my life were in danger or in the case of rape or incest. And let me tell you what that means. Because this happened to a federal employee and they had the same restrictions. A woman who was a federal employee in 2009 became pregnant. She was about 40 years old and learned her child would basically, with 100% certainty, be born dead. So she, under her doctor's recommendation, had an abortion. That's what her doctor told her she should do for her health, for her mental health. And she later learned, several weeks later, that she would have to pay the $9,000 charge for the procedure because it was not covered by her health insurance. That just seems wrong to me. Why would a woman need to carry a child to term that wasn't going to survive maybe more than a few hours? It seems exceptionally cruel, and you know that if men were the ones who got pregnant, that would not be the law of the land. So that's the kind of thing that we are doing in Ohio, and ALEC and related organizations are behind it. And I hate to encourage people to be paranoid, but you've heard the saying, like, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you. It's a little bit like that with ALEC. I mean, they've got their hands in everything. Money talks. They are seeking to just fatten their wallets in the short term. My only hope is that long term it's not going to work out for them, that they're going to whittle down the middle class so much that we won't be able to distract ourselves anymore with nice things like ComFest. And we'll have nothing more to think about anymore than who's doing this to us and what are we going to do about it. Now, hopefully when that happens, we'll have enough energy left to take back over, rise up and, kind of take America back, to use a Tea Party phrase that I'm not a huge fan of, honestly.
Hey, Sarah, you want to out some of these people?
Please, Gabor wants to out a few more ALEC
We're going
members.
to out some people now, okay? You ready?
No Democrats, please.
So I'm going to read this, so you tell me what you know about them, okay? John Adams.
John Adams is a member of the House of Representatives, actually a really nice guy. John Adams, that's a name that just makes you want to change your name to Martha Washington and run for office, isn't it? He's the state chair of ALEC for Ohio.
That's correct.
And, like I said, these guys came in and they're looking for bills to pass, so ALEC's serving them up. Who else you got?
Danny Bumped.
Danny Bupp is not anymore in the House. He was termed out.
Okay.
Military colonel who was responsible for a lot of the anti-woman, anti-choice bills that passed in Ohio these last couple of years.
Ron Amstutz.
Ron Amstutz could be the future Speaker of the Ohio House of Representatives.
And these are all members of ALEC in the Ohio House of Representatives, okay?
Yeah.
Peter Beck.
Peter Beck is under indictment for money laundering, stealing funds from his clients, and funneling it into his campaign.
And he's a member of ALEC.
He will not be in the House next term because he was beaten in a primary by somebody even crazier than him.
Louis Blessing.
Louis Blessing is not in the House anymore, but he was a very, very skilled, manipulative legislator, and now his son is in the House in his seat.
And I'm sure he's a member of. And now we've got a really big one. Who was the House Speaker of the Ohio House before they went to Washington? Who was that guy?
Larry Householder was the Speaker. Bill Batchelder is the current
Was
Speaker.
Boehner's? What was Boehner?
John Boehner. John Boehner.
Now,
was a
John
member.
Boehner is currently the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, and he was originally from down around Kettering, Dayton area, and he is a member of ALEC, in case you're wondering who ALEC is.
And John Boehner's big claim to fame, besides being Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, was delivering checks from tobacco companies on the House floor to congressmen to, I think, procure a vote that day. But, handing out corporate money on the floor of the U.S. Congress doesn't really get any dirtier than that.
Isn't that his job? Okay. So then there's
It's his
William
job.
Colley. Who's William Colley?
Bill Coley is a current senator and pretty active in the voter suppression area. He sponsored a couple of bills that prohibit counties from sending out absentee ballot applications to all voters. Boo. Very much boo. And he prohibited counties from providing return postage and a number of other great things.
Right, and remember that he wants you to vote for him, but after he gets through with it, you won't be able to.
Right.
Anyway, Tim Derrickson.
Tim Derrickson, I don't know too much about. He's a current House Representatives member, and,
Yeah, these are all. Matt Huffman.
Matt Huffman's term limited. Good.
That's it? Okay. Now, who's the governor again?
Governor John Kasich.
And he's on this list.
What a surprise.
What a surprise. Governor John Kasich, is member of ALEC. Casey Kozlowski.
Casey Kozlowski, fortunately, was defeated last year by John Patterson. Casey Kozlowski was about 18 or 19 years old, one of the youngest members ever, and benefited from a Tea Party candidate who came in and spoiled the election.
Frank LaRose.
Frank LaRose is one of those guys that the Republicans describe as an up-and-comer, which means he's attractive, he's got a military background, he's got young kids, and he's going to be around for a while. He is in the Senate, and we got to watch him.
We got to watch him. And you can vote for him until Bill Coley gets done with you. Ronald Magg.
Ron Magg is one of those guys who walks around with the fetus feet pin on his lapel, and he's special. He also really likes guns a lot. If he had his way, I believe, I could be wrong about this, but I think he has sponsored the bill to allow guns in daycare. And also, I think guns in the State House, but that might have been Colonel Bupp, who's not there anymore.
You want to keep going?
Keep going.
Is this helpful? Is this helpful? You want to keep hearing? One more. I'll pick a big one, I guess. You pick one.
The audience threw out Bill Seitz. Bill Seitz is an unapologetic member of ALEC. He is, man, if you guys have not seen his work, you need to look him up.
He has some success behind him, doesn't he?
Who said that?
Say it again.
Okay, we got questions here, okay? But
Yeah.
he had a recent big success.
Well, which one? Because he's got his hands in a lot of things.
SB 310, and maybe
Yes.
the writer in the budget bill that just recently passed. This all happened within the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, he's very unapologetically behind the SB 310, the rolling back the renewable energy standards.
Say what
And,
SB 310 is.
Yeah, 310 rolls back the
What is it?
renewable energy standards for 2 years, puts a pause on that. But one thing about Bill Seitz is I have to, give credit because in an environment like this, the Democrats really have to work with the other side, the majority, as deeply in the minority as we are. But he came around and finally helped get past the End Demand Act, which was something that will lessen the impact of human trafficking in the state and will treat victims of human trafficking like victims of crimes instead of like prostitutes who need to be prosecuted themselves. So it's kind of funny. Sometimes you do have some successes with these people who are doing horrible things in other areas. But yeah, the SB 310 is definitely a bad step for Ohio. Senator Seitz is also involved in a lot of the voter suppression bills, unfortunately. The one thing about him is he's pretty unapologetic and a little more honest about it than other members of the legislature. Very clear about what he's doing. These voting rights attacks, these women's rights attacks, they are very much about controlling who is voting, controlling who has the power. Because these businesses, who doesn't want businesses to make money? Nobody. We want businesses to make money. It enables our lifestyle, our American lifestyle. Every day we're giving our money to businesses. We're supporting the businesses that we like and that give us good service. But we just want fairness. A little fairness goes a long way. And these, exactly, yeah.
So, Sarah, the laws, this is a conveyor belt. You have to think of this as a conveyor belt. And it's a conveyor belt all across the country at all levels of government. And the philosophy here is to get to the lowest levels of government. The newest initiative is to go after city councils, to go after counties, states, because people live every day in their city, in their county, then their state, then the federal government. So they're doing this at all levels. And you have to think of a manufacturing plant. These people are manufacturing these model laws, and they're being conveyor belted across the country, one after another, state after state after state. So I want to ask Sarah for little trade secrets. Do you know what's coming? What is coming? What should we be watching for?
Right to work, which is a misnomer, and it really should be called right to work for less. It's also a bill that takes away freedom from employers. What it does is basically prohibits an employer from requiring union membership from their employees. I, for one, think employers should be free to require union membership from their employees. If they want to negotiate with one block instead of every single individual employer or employee, they, as an employer, should be permitted to decide that. And obviously, I'm for workers' rights and the right to organize and decide who negotiates on their own behalf as well. But that will be the biggest thing. And again, it's about power. It's about who votes. It's about who has the funds to support the politicians they want to be in charge.
Say what happened in Tennessee.
I'm assuming in Tennessee, and I'm not exactly sure, did they enact right to work?
Yeah, well, right to work is enacted in Tennessee, and right now Volkswagen is fighting the state legislator because Volkswagen is unionized in Germany. They're not unionized here. The results were bad. They want the union in Volkswagen in Tennessee, and the state is fighting them, and Volkswagen is fighting the state because they don't have the right to allow their workers to unionize, even though they want it, even though they have proven that the results are bad. When unions are in place, there is accountability in the workplace between the workers. They can self-moderate. They can make sure people are being productive. When there's no unions, there's no control, no organization, no self-government going on at all.
That's right. It's hard to overstate just how much these people are puppets of their very wealthy corporate overlords. And it just shows a very strong lack of long-term thinking because it's not something that's sustainable. Is there a question? Say it louder.
Have you mentioned Connie Pillich yet?
I have not. The question was, have I mentioned Connie Pillich? Connie Pillich is a member of the House Democratic Caucus. She is super hardworking person. She's running for state treasurer against State Treasurer Josh Mandel. And she is just awesome and really a great person, nice person, ethical person, very smart. She's an attorney with banking law, part of her practice. And she was a captain in the Air Force. She looks a little bit like Private Benjamin in some of her older pictures with her uniform on. But she's pretty great. And, we need a lot more people like her. I would say that a lot of people in the legislature are there for the right reasons and there to make change and make people's lives better. But the system we have, which ALEC perpetuates, is one where they're beholden to corporations, to the very big moneyed, very tiny minority of the country.
Sarah?
Yes.
I have one question, then we should open up to the audience.
Sure, go ahead.
So we talked about what is going on right now and what exists. So what people need to know is, what do we do? How to handle it? What do you want people to do?
That's right. That was the third part of my talk today, which is what can you do? And it can feel very overwhelming. I certainly know I get up here and just kind of ramble on about what ALEC's done, and you hear a lot of that, here at ComFest. There's a lot to talk about, but it's actually pretty simple. I mean, you need to speak, you need to vote. You can call and write your legislator as much as you want every single day if you want. They really actually listen to that. They get freaked out when people are calling their office, even the Republican ones. You can testify on bills. If you have any questions about how to find out information about that stuff, call your legislator. Look up Google House of Representatives, Google left ALEC. They're no longer a member. At least I think they're not. Do an internet search for your House of Representatives member and call them and ask how you can find out more about the bills that are going through right now. Because you can find out and you can come and testify. Even though there's this environment of, we're in charge and we're in power and don't step out of line, you have the power. It is still the people's house. You can come and testify and tell them what you think. And that's what we really, really need. We just need bodies down there showing up and telling them what you really care about. Otherwise, they're just going to march right over us. That's what they've been doing, despite the fact that most people don't want the policies they've been passing.
Listen, when there are demonstrations and people do demonstrations about an event and you see it, don't think showing up is not going to make a difference. If they have 40 people show up protesting something, they don't care. If you get 4,000 people on the State House lawn, they're going to start thinking twice about what they're doing.
I'll take 40. What? 40 would be fine.
Well, she'll take 40.
400's better.
I'm taking bids. Let's go. Tim, how'd you do with that Immokalee people? How many people showed up at those things? This was a fair food fight by farm workers from Florida, trying to get Kroger and people to add some money so they can get some benefits. How many people showed up, Tim?
For the shareholders meeting, which we had 3 representatives of the Coalition of Imalaki Workers able to speak before the shareholders by proxy, is on a Wednesday afternoon in the morning, work day, is 80 people showed up on the street, and then we had our representatives inside. So there was 4 people that spoke before Emil Brolick of Wendy's, asking them to join the Fair Food Program here in Ohio, or not Ohio, but basically with the Coalition of Imalaki Workers.
Are there any organizations, Sarah, that are actively organizing people specifically for this at all in Ohio?
There are a number of organizations trying to push back. It can feel very overwhelming because, we're, like I said, deep in the minority via the gerrymandered district map. Ohio is basically a 50-50 state, but we've got 75% of our congressional representation is Republican, 25% Democrat. In our state house, we've got 60% Republican and 40% Democrat, even though the Democrats got 100,000 more votes than the Republicans. So it can be very discouraging. There are groups though, and you just have to kind of talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and that's why I'm here speaking at ComFest, is to encourage people, whether there's 2 people in the 10 or 12 people, or I'm preaching to the choir or not. I think people get a little charge, a little motivation out of being here at ComFest and seeing the mellow, the niceness, the community. And it motivates them to go out in their world in the coming weeks, months, year, and make change. So please do that. That is what gets people activated. I'm sure you know somebody here who knows about a protest that's going to go on, or a demonstration, or a committee hearing where you can make your voice heard. There are groups like unions, for example. I want to throw this in. Monday, tomorrow, there's going to be a big U.S. Supreme Court decision that affects the future of public employee unions. And it doesn't just affect the future of public employee unions, it affects the future of the Democratic Party, which is the only counterweight we have to the right-wing Republicans right now. Whether you're a Democrat or not, it's the only real counterweight we have to the people in power right now. So tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., we will find out if public employee unions kind of get to continue to exist. It's a big day. It's a scary day. But if the decision does not go our way, which it might not, that will be a catalyst. That will wake people up, I think. So there's always these things that happen. You sometimes hear it has to get a little worse to get better. You wonder how much worse it can really get. But that's something you could pay attention to tomorrow, is this public employee union decision as a motivator.
Yeah, I'll tell you, look to see if there are any groups that you can participate in. And then here's something else you can do. you can start a group. If you find people who are like-minded and there's not a group, go find one. There are people who will file the papers for you. There are all kinds of attorneys in this town that know how to structure these things. We had one. There's all kinds of good attorneys that will help form a group, form an LLC, get a 501c3, recruit people, form it. Because if you're not going to do it, no one else will.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit because, yes, form a group if you want to form a group. But let me just say,
if you don't find one.
There's a lot of groups out there. There's the Ohio Democratic Party. The Ohio Democratic Party. There are other parties if that's not your thing.
How can they be more active in the Ohio Democratic Party?
Go down to ODP. It's on Grant and Fulton. They'll put you to work. They'll give you something to do. I mean, the ALEC and the Koch brothers and the related groups have really broken down the strength of state parties, and that has hurt our ability to organize and be unified on our messaging and on fighting back on these things. So the Ohio Democratic Party, there's so many groups, actually. There's the unions, there's a lot of nonpartisan groups, the League of Women Voters, Advocates for Ohio's Future, One Ohio Now. I mean, there's just a ton I could rattle off, but there's plenty out there. I tend to think joining what's already in existence is the better way to go. As I said in the beginning, am a hardcore believer in the Democratic platform and encourage you all to support what the ODP is fighting for. I think that is our best chance. But to each their own, and go out and seek what works for you. So to wrap up here, I think I covered, what is ALEC, what their connection is to Ohio, what they're doing in Ohio, why you should care about it. I hope I didn't rattle your brains too much, too many issues, but their attacks on voting rights, women's rights, workers' rights are huge. And it's all about control and greed and their bottom line and their short-term bottom line without a lot of long-term thinking. So I hope you will continue to pay attention. ALECexposed.com is a good resource.
You want to say some questions?
Write your legislators, your state legislators especially, and I'd be happy to take any other questions.
Anybody? I was curious about if it's supposedly a pro-business think tank or educational group. I can see why limiting voting rights would be pro-business, or why controlling energy policy would be pro-business. But I'm a little curious how the restriction of women's health rights, how that's rationalized or relates to a pro-business agenda that they're supposed to be pushing.
That is a very good question. The question was, how does the anti-women's rights agenda fit with the pro-business agenda or the anti-voting rights agenda? And I contend that it is just part of a larger strategy of control and maintaining the status quo. The status quo is, boards of directors are 95% men. Women make 77 cents on the dollar to what men make. If you try to change that or rattle it, you'll have change. They don't like change. They want the status quo. If you start to expand reproductive health choices to women and actually enable them to claim their right to reproductive health care, then you'll be changing things so much that there might actually be women in charge of things. And that would be really scary to them, and that would disrupt their power. It's as simple as that. It's a power and control thing. Yes, ma'am.
Wouldn't it actually appeal to the, the religious right, to have those kinds of things enacted, or
It panders to the voter bloc, huge voter bloc.
Exactly.
It's funny. The question was, would it appeal to have expanded rights to the Christian groups, basically? Yeah. Well, I mean, the Catholic Church obviously has a very strong anti-choice position, but other groups don't agree. There's conflict with the Christian groups and the religious groups because they want social justice on the one hand, they want anti-death penalty on the one hand, they want voting rights, they want equality and fairness, they want moral goodness for people. However, you have that conflict with the big Catholic anti-choice, anti-abortion movement.
I think that what you all were just talking about regarding the how the restricting women's rights and especially reproductive rights, how that would fit in with the pro-business kind of thing, and so wouldn't that be from appealing to that voting bloc? Would that further that?
So the pro-business agenda seems to mesh with the anti-woman and religious agenda.
Yes, and I think that's because it's just an opinion, but that would appeal to the the extreme right, that voting bloc of conservatism, and they're usually Republican, right?
Right, it definitely does. I think the question is about the link between the pro-business agenda and the anti-woman and anti-rights agenda. And like I said, the Americans United for Life is an offshoot of ALEC and really goes after anti-choice legislation. But they show up every year at the ALEC summer conference, and they are available, and they have the audience of the right-wing legislators. So, those things seem to go hand in hand, and the theme is maintaining power, maintaining the status quo, and maintaining control.
Those kinds of things tend to bring people to the polls, whereas they might not come out and vote for something else, is what I'm saying. They get in their wheelchairs or whatever and come out to vote on anything that seems like the Lord wants them to do that,
Right. The questioner is commenting on the wedge issues and how that will serve the ends of the pro-business agenda, and that's definitely true. In 2004, we passed Issue 1 in Ohio, and we banned marriage equality. We made marriage only between a man and a woman, but pretty soon that's going to be ancient history. Another question.
Okay, you finally said the word wedge issues. So the wedge issues are women's rights. I would say drug legalization, as far as marijuana, possibly. And what would be another one that you'd say? First, all those wedge issues were very strong. Which ones are weakening, where they're not getting the people to actually just take in their hype, basically?
Questions about which wedge issues are real hot right now and which ones are weakening, and I think that it seems clear the marriage equality issue is becoming a wedge issue maybe for the liberal side. I wouldn't say it's weakening. I'd say it's just switching sides. Switch hitting, if you will. The women's issues is a tough one. It stays about 50-50 in Ohio as far as reproductive health options and choice. The other one you mentioned was marijuana, and I actually looked up what ALEC's position was on marijuana. They are for a very limited legalization because they have a lot of pharmaceutical companies that are members, and they, of course, want to maintain control over using those substances, whether they're synthetic or natural, for medicine. So ALEC, being this group that's allegedly born out of the libertarian ideals, is not so libertarian anymore about its marijuana position. It really wants to maintain that high-profit, money-making opportunity for its corporate members. Other wedge issues, we have this Voters' Bill of Rights that's going around, and there's been a lot of petition circulators here at ComFest circulating this bulleted list of rights, basically, that says you can't take these away. We're going to put them in the Constitution. We're going to have early voting. We're going to have voting for everybody. We're going to count votes, even if there's a minor paperwork error. And a lot of stuff that you think is already law and should be because it's very common sense. So we're trying to put some common sense into the Constitution. That group is out there working. If they are not on the ballot this year, maybe they will be in another year or two. It takes about 700,000 signatures collected to get something on the ballot like that. So it's really hard, but voting rights is a very motivating issue right now. And, hopefully all the attention that the right wing is paying to voting rights will backfire and really activate people to claim their rights. Not ask for their rights, but take them.
Sarah, I have a little question. When you want to trap a gorilla, all right, what people do is they dig a pit, right? and they put spikes in the pit. And then they go and they literally, the pygmies in Central Africa used to do this. They tap a gorilla on the back. The gorilla goes nuts. They start running. The gorilla comes after them, falls in the pit, and dies. So if the state is gerrymandered, and we push people and spend all our resources pushing them to vote, and mind you, I am pushing people to vote. So how do we deal with that? I mean, how do we get around that
You can
situation?
only gerrymander the districts, and a lot of statewide races are on the ballot this fall. So when the entire state votes, we do a lot better. When the entire state votes in a presidential election year, we do a lot better. So we have trouble, us liberals and progressives, in years like this where there's not a president, an Obama on the ticket or Hillary Clinton on the ticket. But we have to shift our focus, though. We have to get our voters out. We have to get people to vote. And I don't care if they're Democrats or Republicans. The more people vote, the more the people's will and the more common sense prevails. So hopefully, with organizations like ComFest emphasizing voting, with certain folks in Ohio pushing this Voters' Bill of Rights, with us screaming about as loud as we can all the voter suppression bills, all the voter suppression tactics, hopefully we'll get enough people who are paying attention, who are activated, who go out and tell their friends and neighbors, who will go out and tell their friends and neighbors, hey, we really got to vote, and we really got to change things. I think that's really the best we can do. It doesn't sound like much, but when millions of people do it, it's a lot. And I'll tell you a couple statistics. In Ohio, we had 65% of our voting age population vote. That means that 3 million people did not vote. That's too many. It's too many people. Minnesota, Wisconsin, they have 75% of people turning out. That's the highest we can get in the country. We can even do better than that, I think. But we need an environment where we're actually enabling people to claim their right to vote. It's not what the people in power want right now, and that's exactly why we need to do it. If anybody has any other questions, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, I think we're probably up through the hour.
Yep. I think we're done. Thank you, Sarah Cherry.
All right, everybody, have a happy ComFest. Thanks for coming.
Hopefully she'll be back
It's
next
lovely
year.
to see you.
And update us. In some problem. Hey, excuse me out there. Out in the audience, the people talking, could you leave?
No, they can stay.
You can stay, but
We need bodies.
we need bodies. All right, she wants you to stay. Anyway, Sarah, please explain.
Thank you, Gabor. And let me just start by saying a big thank you to all the people who are running ComFest, because it has been another wonderful ComFest. If you make this, one of your annual things to do to recharge, then you know I'm right. That's been a great weekend, great music, great weather, and the ubiquitous Saturday rainstorm. So thank you, ComFest volunteers. Woohoo! And I personally am really happy that ComFest has done a lot more speaking about issues that are important to our community, our state, our country, on all of the stages. As we were waiting for bands to set up, it's good for us to hear what's going on in the community and what kinds of things we should be paying attention to, because it's very easy to get complacent in our daily lives and just kind of go through the motions and go to the mall and get some clothes to wear to work, or go out and get beers and watch the World Cup, go USA, or any number of things. There's lots of distractions, but we have to spend some time too on issues that are important to our community. So I am here to talk to you about ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. I've heard a little bit about it on other stages this weekend, and that has been great. American Legislative Exchange Council really sounds wholesome, doesn't it? Like a marketplace of ideas. And that's exactly why they named it that way, an innocuous name to sound like, just how things should work. But it's really not. So what I'm here to talk to you about today, this is my third year at ComFest talking about this group and related issues, is why you should care about ALEC and why it's not good for the country, the state, or your local community. I'm legal counsel to the House Democrats and the minority, the deep minority at the Ohio House of Representatives. I am a Democrat all the way. I am not a Green Party person. I am not a communist. I'm not a socialist. I'm a Democrat. I believe strongly in the planks of the Democratic platform. I join here at ComFest with my Green Party friends, whoever they may be, and all the hippies and radicals and just regular people who care about making our community a good place to live and thrive. So as I said, I want you to know what ALEC is, why you should care about it, what they're doing in Ohio, and what you can do to join in the conversation and the fight. It's not even a conversation, it's a fight. ALEC has a lot of power, and what they fear the most is all of you and all those people out there in ComFest fighting back, because they really can't beat us if we all stand up. And I'll say, this is my 3rd year, and this is a lot of people under the tent, and it's not even raining. So that's really good. Woohoo! So how many people think that corporations should be able to vote? Nobody. That is great. You guys are awesome. Okay. How many people think corporations should be able to get married? Nobody. Great. God, you guys are the best. All right, how many people think that corporations should decide all of the policies that govern our community? Awesome, nobody wants that. Okay, we are all on the same page here. Okay, so ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, here's what they are. They're a group of corporations that get together with legislators, state legislators, and decide what our laws will be in the states in this country. And a lot of people don't realize that state government impacts their lives a lot more than even federal laws. And we all talk about the Health Care Act, ACA, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it. We all talk about wars going on, Iraq, Afghanistan. We all talk about, or hear about, Benghazi a lot, and things like that. But really, state government, local government is the stuff that affects your daily life a lot more than all that other junk. And the conservatives and the right-wing folks really know that, and that's why they have put together ALEC and many other related organizations to kind of take over more secretively. So the ALEC group has annual conventions and periodical meetings where they'll get state legislators together, and these corporations will pay huge membership fees to be a member. Well, what that entitles them to in this group is equal voting rights on model legislation that state legislators will then pass. Now, let me just give you a little background before I get into that. The state legislatures are very, very gerrymandered. And you've probably, who has not heard the word gerrymandered? Oh, you all know about gerrymandering and redistricting and how unfair that is. That is awesome. You are the best audience. So with their gerrymandered legislatures, they're really in control. So now that they're in control, what are they going to have the legislatures do? They need to give them some bills to pass. So what ALEC does is gets together with the legislators, gets their corporate buddies together, and they design model bills. And they have committees. They kind of function as a quasi-legislature. And they'll come up with a model bill like the Voter ID Act. Because, like I said, what ALEC fears is all of us standing up and actually exercising our American right to vote. They really fear that. They do not want all of us voting because that is the one thing that can take down their policies. So, for example, they have the Voter ID Act. They want strict photo ID. In Ohio, we have a voter ID law. It was enacted in 2006. You can use a lot of different documents, which is good, but it's also confusing because we have this long list, and a lot of people just think you have to have your driver's license to vote. That's kind of what the people who enacted the law wanted to happen. So when you go to vote, here in Ohio, you can use your driver's license, a state ID, a government document, a utility bill, something like that. But in a lot of states, you actually have to have just a photo ID, strict photo ID. And if you don't have that, you can't vote, or you have to vote a provisional ballot, which means that you'll have to show up later in the next couple of days or next week with a photo ID. And if you don't do that, then your vote will not count. So that's one of the things that ALEC has worked on. And it seems a little out of step with their mission, because ALEC is really, they claim to be a group of corporations who wants business-friendly policies, and really to make sure their business-friendly policies get enacted, they have to make sure their business-friendly legislators stay in office. So what is ALEC? ALEC has these conferences. Their annual conference is coming up in July in Dallas. And they'll get a bunch of legislators there, and they'll wine and dine them, and they're very smooth. They're very slick. These are wealthy people. These are people who their whole job is to be smooth and be slick. And so they do it, and they do it well. And they're going to convince these legislators that these policies are good for the country. Because honestly, the legislators that are going, they're not all bad people. They don't have the greatest set of ideals or the greatest ideology, but they're also kind of getting hoodwinked by the corporations and the members